O'clock, and I'll call this Barre City Council meeting to order this Tuesday, December 12th. At we have council present tonight, including Councilor Deering, Councilor Sean Bell, Councilor Booton, Councilor Stockwell, and Councilor Lozon, and Councilor Wozniak had a planned absence. Tonight's agenda is available online and in the back of the room. The meeting has been publicly posted, it is being recorded, and subject to Vermont's open meeting law and the council's rules of procedure, which are available online. Welcome everybody joining us here in the room tonight, as well as those of you joining online. The city offers online access as a convenience, and we will continue the meeting if any technical difficulties occur. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, you can put them in the chat and we'll see if we can get to them. Otherwise, the chat should not be used. And please remain muted except when speaking. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand or signal that you'd like to be recognized, including here in the room. And if you're here in the room, we'll ask that you come forward and speak in the microphone so that everybody online in the recording can hear you. I'll ask that all speakers state their name for the record. And if you have any questions about process or procedure, please ask and we'll get it sorted. I want to thank everybody in advance for participating in a civil and respectful way. With that takes us to our second item on the agenda, adjustments to the agenda. Manager Shirley Castro.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't know if we should ratify or make appointments to the VLCT Welcoming and Engaging Communities Grant, since we have the opportunity to. Last week, the council approved this grant. The grant requires nominations of up to 3 nominees to participate from the city. And they weren't made last week because it was moved to consent agenda. So we just need to identify up to 3 individuals to participate.
And this is something that the Diversity and Equity Committee Chair brought to you and me and is interested in participating in. So Joellen's interested in being one of the people, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would anybody else be interested in joining this cohort?
I might be interested. So there are 2 people already? No, there's 1 person. There's Joellen. That could be a second person.
And I confirmed with Jude, who runs the program, that 2 people would be satisfactory. Okay, so
what is required of that? I guess I'm asking what the time commitments are.
So it was in last week's packet. I think there's 6, 7, 8 sessions. 2 of them are in person. The rest of them are remote. They kick off. They run into the spring. I can try to pull up the details. It was in last week's packet, so I don't have it in my binder.
There's a hand raised.
I'll do it. I could always use some extra diversity and equity.
perfect. All right, that's 3.
Throw me in.
That's awesome. That's 3 names to be added to the consent agenda. And councilors, do you have any adjustments to the agenda?
So I have a question on the ratification of the lease agreement.
Yeah.
Did the council approve? I've missed a couple of meetings in the last 12 months. Did the council approve that previously? Is that the ratification, or is this coming before the council for the first time?
It's retrospective, Councilor Lozon. What happened here? So the council did not approve it previously. This was my oversight. Since I'm on the steering committee of Barre Up, I wasn't involved in negotiations. Assistant manager, city manager Don Monahan handled it, and so it fell out of my workflow, and I didn't get it on the agenda at the time that it was being negotiated. So it's really a sort of a retrospective approval. It's already in effect.
And I don't have an issue with the lease per se. I just process.
Yeah, of course.
Carol, don't land agreements, including leases, have to come before the council?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't necessarily be a ratification. It would be an approval, and then we'd have to ratify it at our next meeting, just in keeping with process. The only question I had about the lease agreement was liability insurance. You know, it is a separate organization from the city, and whether we were going to require any liability insurance, which is kind of typical with a commercial lease. Not going to stand in the way either way. Just wanted to bring that to the council's attention, both points.
We did not include that in the lease at the time. I didn't know they were going to have any revenue from cash flow.
Yeah.
So the city just assumed
Okay, so they will not be required to have liability insurance and name the city as additionally insured.
The way the agreement is right now.
Yeah. Lukewarm on that point, but again, not going to stand in the way. They're doing good work. So however you want to handle it, Mayor, I'm fine with it.
So modify the consent agenda to say approval of the lease agreement with Barre Up, which then would need to be ratified because it was not noticed that way at the subsequent meeting. Is that your intention?
Yep,
Councilor
I think
Lozon?
that would be appropriate.
Yeah. And I think, I think it's good that we are tightening up these lease arrangements. I know, like, we didn't have one for the Wheelock House, I don't think, for the Rotary or for the partnership. And then there's been like use of the wastewater treatment plant by other organizations and things. So I think it's good that we're formalizing
I think
these
we did.
arrangements with outside organizations.
Yeah, no, we did we did actually approve the lease agreement with both the Rotary and with that. That's what begged the question on my part, is that I remembered
Yeah.
approving the lease agreement with the Rotary and
Yeah.
with the Barre Partnership. And
Yeah,
then
that
I
was
couldn't
after
remember.
After I
Yeah.
discovered that there was
Oh, okay, I got
a
you.
lease.
We're good.
All right, so that takes us to, if there are no other adjustments to the agenda, and hearing and seeing none, that takes us to visitors and communications, and I did see a hand raised. Kate Van Wagner?
Actually, it's Joellen Mulvaney from.
Oh, you're really muffled. You might want to check your
Okay.
mic. There you
It's
are.
actually Joellen Mulvaney from the North End. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I was really disturbed at the framing way that the budget items were framed at the last meeting.
Oh, I can just barely distinguish you, Joe Ellen.
All right. Ask Sonia to speak and then I'll come back. Because maybe
Okay. All right. Sonia Spalding, I see your hand raised.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, can you repeat what we think Joellen
Oh, I
said for the
think Joellen
minutes?
said,
Because I didn't hear.
Joellen said she's going to try to fix the sound. If
Oh,
you could
okay.
call on Sonia and then loop back
Okay,
to her.
thank you.
So,
Hi,
Good
thank
evening.
you. Can you hear me okay?
yeah, I can.
Okay. I'm here tonight to ask the City Council to give its full support to the Aldrich Library regarding funding. I think the library will probably be coming before you in the next few weeks to ask for their normal allocation. And with recent discussions about the municipal budget, I want to make sure that the council is considering the impact of what cuts might look like at the library and who they would impact the most. First, I would like you to all imagine your visits to the library. Maybe it was for story time with your kids. Maybe it was a meeting or an art show. Maybe it was browsing the stacks for the perfect book to read on a snowy day, or helping your own kids pick out books to take home. I'm guessing many of you on council can relate to some, if not all, of these kinds of visits to the library. Or maybe you can imagine you're a visitor who gets their summer meals at the library, or participates in teen activities, or uses the computers to connect with friends or apply for jobs, or comes into the library on a cold winter day to warm up. Now, imagine the library was not able to provide all of these services. Would you be okay? Would your life change? Maybe, or maybe not. The library is a vital part of our community and provides so much for so many. And I would ask that you consider that when you think about how much funding the library needs, that you recognize that part of it is an equity issue. Think about the voices and the people that probably won't come before you and ask for more funding for the library. You may not be directly impacted by a cut in funding, but there are many families and individuals who utilize and depend on the library for so many things. Please do not make decisions in a vacuum, but consider who your decisions are going to impact the most. Please take care of all of the members of our community and take care of one of the greatest assets of our community, our library. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Booten?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, there's no cuts anywhere on it. We're just level funding. That's what the presentation for the budget is.
I haven't seen a presentation on the library, so if I could reply back, my concern is that level funding is actually a cut because there are increases in heat and other water, everything that the library has to pay for, staff, all of those things require increases. I'm sure that most people on council got a raise this year or some kind of cost of living adjustment. And so I would ask you to consider that level funding is not actually level, is a cut for the library. Thank you.
You get paid?
I do.
Can you hear me now?
Joellen?
Can you hear me now?
I can.
You can? Okay, good. So as I was saying, I was real disturbed about the way that the budget items had been framed. Specifically, the categorization of organizations that serve the city and are supported by the budget. There's a huge difference between groups that serve the commerce of the community and those that serve the people. The difference is so great that they should not be lumped together and be seen as equal value to residents and the community. A library is a vital community and resident service, not just for equal access to public education and culture, but for providing social support and services to the homeless and the poor. Since 1907, when Barre's 2 subscription libraries merged in, and the building we now see was completed, the city has supported the public library's mission to serve the city. Leonard Frost Aldrich donated the funds to build the library, and he also put some money into supporting the mission for the future. Unfortunately, those assets that he put for the purpose of supporting the city are now in private hands. So they are serving a private person, a private landlord, and not the library. Line items for other potential cuts for the ancillary organizations can be lumped together as one, but the library is not ancillary in any way, and that needs its own line item to reflect the city's acceptance of equity in its budget. Services for residents are a much needed priority and should be seen as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Joellen. And I thought that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the library is listed as
It is a separate item.
line
Yep.
item. But yeah, I think you're right that the voter approved assistance has been lumped together for the other entities. So, Lisa Leota.
Hi, good evening. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, but I did want to just respond to Sonia's comment about the library being level funded. And I apologize, I have a puppy here who's probably going to chime in. I noticed as I was reviewing the city's budget that something like 60+% of expenses are related to personnel and benefits. And I want to say that so are the libraries. The libraries' expenses that they have for personnel and benefits, just like the cities, are linked to union contracts and staffing that are already working. And to not fund any increase for the library is essentially a cut. And I would just really like to see this council consider that when they consider their funding for the Aldrich Library, because a level fund is a cut to those staff positions. And libraries just have tremendous benefit to us. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other items for visitors and communications? All right. Hearing and seeing none, that takes us to our consent agenda. So we have approval of the minutes of the regular city council meeting of Tuesday, December 5th, 2023. We have approval of the city warrants from the week of December 12th, 2023. Do we have any licenses or permits?
We do. Entertainment licenses, we're starting to get the renewals for 2024. Entertainment licenses for, and these are annual licenses for the Old Labor Hall, for the American Legion, for the Barre Opera House, for Ladder One Grill, the Vermont Granite Museum, and the Meltdown, and then also a 2024 waste disposal collector's license for MK Trucking for 3 drop-off vehicles. All of them have the associated department approvals, and they're just included in the consent agenda unless someone wants to pull them out.
We have approval of the lease agreement with Barre Up, and we have an authorization for the manager to execute contracts with Martin Appraisal Services for assessment services. And then the last is the ratification of the Welcoming and Engaging Communities cohort with the appointments of Joellen Mulvaney, Sam Stockwell, and Councilor Deering. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Councilor Lozon, second by Councilor Shambell.
Seems like we need a little more elaboration on item E. I mean, holy cow, this has been 3 years in the making. We have suffered through this and we just put it on the consent agenda. Nicholas, congratulations. This is a huge, huge win for the city.
We're very happy. I think the only person happier is Janet, who was doing cartwheels down the main hallway there, but we're very. Still, yes. So it fills a huge gap for the city, so.
Fantastic, nice job.
No offense to Carol Dawes, but when Nicholas started early, I said the second most important job in City Hall is the assessor, because that's where the revenue comes from. So although you collect it.
That's okay.
So,
it's a symbiotic relationship, so.
And so seeing this filled, it's tremendously important and appreciated. So we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. The consent agenda is adopted. That takes us to the clerk treasurer report.
I got nothing. No,
right.
the only thing is just a continuing reminder that water and sewer bills are due by the 2nd of January, because the last day of December is a weekend, and then the first day of January is a holiday, so they're due by December 2nd, or January 2nd.
Sewer bills, January 2nd. And no liquor cannabis control items?
Nope.
Okay. And then that takes us to the city manager's report.
Thanks, Mayor. A couple updates on landslide reports. As I shared with council earlier this week, we expect the Pike Street report on December 15th. And I've spoken with the homeowners about the timeline there. So they're aware of the timing, and that'll help inform our next steps on those two properties. The city also issued 2 RFPs for repairs to 2 systems that have just become way past their prime and becoming issues. One is the HVAC system in this building, which we've identified bond resources to support, and one is for the HVAC system at public safety, which has never been replaced in the history of the building and is not heating the building, and there's staff working in winter coats inside. So we've taken the opportunity to do 2 RFPs at once for both HVAC systems. Those due dates for those are January 16th, so we expect to come back to the council, hopefully, if we get bids, with considerations of awards for those 2 key updates and maintenance updates for the city buildings. As a reminder, last week, the city issued tentative substantial damage letters. There were 83 property letters that went out for a total of 86 structures. As of last week, so this may have changed, but 16 have applications started with the permit administrator. And as a reminder, the information is due back to the permitting office by December 31st, so we can determine whether those will remain substantially damaged or if we'll remove the designation. Update on North End public engagement. Councilor Stockwell, Pat Moulton, and Tess Taylor have taken on sort of the logistical planning for this. We've, as a group, decided to shift these meetings into after the new year to avoid holidays. We were getting to the point where we were going to be just interfering with people's celebrations, and we were not going to probably have people's full attention. So we're shifting into the new year for when those meetings will start. We've also focused on North End specific meetings, looking at the Labor Hall for the primary meeting, and then looking for spaces for smaller neighborhood meetings as well. So we'll have more details on that, but that's the timeline there. We're initially hoping from December, but we're just too close to the holidays at this point to really be engaging folks adequately. The update on the assurance of discontinuance with the state, the 30-day public comment period has expired. As you recall, this was a settlement for an illegal discharge from wastewater treatment facility from several years ago. We have agreed to reduce penalty. That had to go to open for a 30-day public comment period to see if there are any objections to that. We've passed the 30-day public comment period, so we expect that A&R will be the AOD will be filed with the court tomorrow, and the city will file a motion to dismiss our appeal at the same time, and so we will now be under the terms of that AOD probably by Friday. Positive news, we've received the invoice for the turf at the BOR. So we received payments from the BYSA in the town. So that is on track to be delivered and installed for after the ice comes out of the BOR in March. And as we've discussed a little bit earlier, I was going to welcome the new assessor that the councilor just approved the contract for. We're very happy this gap has been filled. As you saw from the contract and the article in the Times-Argus, it's Larry and Carly Martin who will be serving as our assessor and assistant assessor respectively. We start meeting with them tomorrow to start the onboarding and transition process. And just really, they're going to be focusing on the flood damage properties. I think we're in a place where haven't been able to say in a long time, but feeling better about assessment, not only with Larry and Carly, but last meeting with Bill Krajewski here, knowing that the citywide reappraisal is delayed for a full year, and he's going to be able to tackle the backlog on building permits. So I think we're setting up a situation for Larry and Carly to be very successful and to get this grand list back on a really good cycle. So that's it for me.
Got 2 questions for you. So what are the steps that residents need to take for the substantial damage letters?
So the first thing they should do is collect all their invoices for any repairs they had done at their home. And the next step would be to come see or call the permitting office, see Janet or Michelle, and they can walk them through the process. They can also go see Barre Up, and Barre Up is familiar with the process as well and can help them navigate sort of what they need to collect and what the city will be looking for.
So just invoices and receipts that they've already spent money on?
Exactly, for flood repair that they did.
Yep. And then to bring that to Janet?
Correct.
Or to Catherine at the planning office?
Janet or Michelle.
Michelle, sorry.
Here in the permitting office. And if they have questions, see them, of course. If they have questions, need assistance, they can also see Barre Up for
Right, I
help
did
as
see
well.
that in the letter today, because I have a couple of constituents asking about those letters and what they should be doing about them.
Yeah, there's a lot of places to get help. So the first thing, the best way to do it is to come prepared with invoices so we can help guide people through the process. But they can always also just make a stop at the permitting office or here at the old PD.
Now a question, what if people don't have invoices?
So they should try to contact their contractors if they can. I think in that situation, the first thing I'd do is go talk to Janet or Michelle and they'll guide them through what possible next steps could be.
Okay, I'm just trying to get all the possibilities out there before I meet with people.
Of course.
Second question was, when is the warming shelter going to be opening at the library?
So we are not sure that it's going to be at the library. I met the new executive director last week, 2 weeks ago, and that was one of our topics of conversation. I think that the library expressed some operational challenges with hosting the shelter there. So I believe Tess Taylor's been talking to some of the local churches to see if there's some other options. But at this point, it doesn't appear likely that it will be at the library based on what we heard from library staff.
Okay.
We do have just as an ancillary note to that, Councilor Deering, the city did put a separate line item in the budget last year, $6,000 to fund a warming shelter. It's not specific to the library. We always anticipated it would go to the library, but fortunately, if another organization steps up, we will have some resources to help fund it. The library, I believe, used it for supplies, food, and a part-time staff person. And so if there's another organization that can use those resources, we're not tied to funding specifically the library. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to get ahead on thinking about that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, appreciate it.
That's all I've got.
Are there any other questions for Councilor Lozon?
Thank you. Nicholas, just circling back to the North End meetings.
Yes.
So you mentioned the Labor Hall. Would that be for the initial meeting or for the North End specific meeting?
So we're thinking that it would be for the initial meeting to make it local to the neighborhood. So that was the thought of the group at the moment. It's to have the big meeting there and then smaller neighborhood meetings in other locations in the North End, even looking at ward specific meetings. So a Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 1. Yeah.
So do you know what, I don't know what the capacity is at the Labor Hall. I mean, I know the building, I know the size, 200, 250?
I believe it's, I think 250 is what
So 250, if we move that meeting 1,000 feet south to the Opera House, we increased the capacity to 600, Carol? You used to run it?
650.
600. My big concern is that, and you and I have talked about this, so, you know, we've had this conversation. I'd rather put our best foot forward and secure the largest facility we have, whether that's the auditorium or the Barre Opera House, the Opera House. And if we have to turn people away, if more than 600 people are interested in attending an in-person meeting, we did the very best we could. Right. We secured the largest facility. I'd be disappointed, and honestly, I'd be surprised if the attendance was less than 250 for the initial meeting, because we're a city of 8,000 people. So on a percentage basis, if 10% of our residents want to attend, and I realize that, you know, that's probably an aggressive number, that's 800 people, and we don't necessarily even have a venue where we could entertain that number of guests. So my thought would be, you know, Opera House or auditorium for the initial meeting, so that if people do get turned away, we can at least look at them and say, look, we did the very, very best we could. Just a thought.
Yeah, and I think it's one we've gone back and forth sort of within our small working group. You know, we saw the value of holding it in the neighborhood as well, which was attractive, made the labor hall attractive. You know, I think the idea of having frankly, just having a cozier setting as well, even if we have people standing, it would be, you know, it would give the sense of engagement as well. I think we're open to it. I mean, Councilor Stockwell was with us at our last planning meeting. I think the group sort of vacillated back and forth. We knew we were making a trade-off. Certainly nothing's set in stone on that front. We can certainly talk about it with the group.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
I'd just rather have the largest venue, so that if people do get turned away from an in-person meeting, we can at least look at them and say, we did the very best we could.
Yeah, we can discuss with, we can round the group up and talk about the options.
Right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the city manager? Hearing and seeing none, that takes us to our first item of new business, FY25 budget update.
Okay. So, councilors, you have the PowerPoint on your desks, and I'm going to try to get it up here on the screen for the folks at home. And Don will join us at the table. Great. So a lot of, let's see if I can get this to go here. Okay. So the PowerPoint, and this has been posted on our website for anyone who's at home. It wasn't part of the packet, but there's a budget page on my website, on my part of the website. So anyone who wants to get the full PowerPoint is also able to go get it off the city website and download it there. So I left all the usual budget information towards the appendix, so we can sort of hone in on a couple of discussion topics for today, based on some discussion that occurred at the last council meeting. So we talked about the possibility of moving town meeting day. This came up, Manager Emeritus McKenzie credited with the idea. And let me just minimize here so people can see. So we did our homework to go back and see what statute says and what the charter says. And the idea, just for stepping a little bit backwards, is the idea of this is that if we don't change town meeting day, which is on March 5th this year, we have to warn a budget on January 30th, which gives us very little time, no time basically, to know what the state's going to do. The thought was that if we have a later town meeting day, we would at least have, we would both have a better sense of what the state may be doing. And we have more actually just year-to-date data for ourselves. So it would give us just even more, absent even any state data, it would give us more information anyway to craft a budget. So the applicable pieces of state law and charter are on this slide. You can see that Act 1 of the legislature provides for, from last year, provides for flexibility in moving the date of a town meeting to a date later in the same year. So about as broad as you can get. And the charter is equally broad. Section 202 provides for the annual date to be on the first Tuesday in March, unless otherwise legally warned by the council. So that's a pretty as broad as you can get as well. So really, the legal authority is there to move the town meeting day. Now, what would that do? So as we talked about, this would, the consideration of the delay is to really better inform the budget. We would have, as I mentioned, an idea of the magnitude of external financial assistance. Gives us 2 more months of year-to-date data. And it also gives voters, I think, a clear decision point about what the budget would mean. And so if looking at the timelines here, our town meeting day, the current is March 5th. We have to approve it. We have to warn it by January 30th. We're recommending a consideration of a May 14th town meeting day, which tracks with Barre Town's schedule. And that would mean a warning approved by council on April 9th. Now, this slide wasn't in your packet, council, or that was emailed, but this is information that Clerk Dawes pulled together for some of the other implications, because it obviously means more than just the budget vote would be impacted. So this runs down really the 6 key actions that are tied to town meeting day and what would happen should it be moved to May 14th. So you can see the warning for the first and second public hearings for charter changes would, if we change nothing, the first warning would be December 19th. And the hearings would be, the hearings would be the 23rd and 6th, 23rd of January, 6th of February. Petitions for public questions would be due January 18th of 24. Ballots for the presidential primary would be on January 20th, 24. Petitions for city candidates under no changes are due January 29th, 2024. Petitions for the school board and CVCC school board candidates would be also due January 29th. And as I mentioned, the warning would have to be approved on January 30th. All those dates obviously shift if council considers a 5/14 town meeting day. The warning and the hearings would shift to March and April respectively. Petitions would be due at the end of March on a Saturday. The presidential primary wouldn't change. This would have to happen March 5th no matter what, as would the school board elections. Petitions for city candidates would shift to April 8th, 2024. And likewise, the warning, as I mentioned, would be due on April 9th. So this just gives you an idea, flavor for what the implications are. We landed on a 5/14 date because that tracks nicely to what the town is doing. I think to the extent we can reduce confusion, having it the same day of the town may be helpful if we are going to shift it from the date that our residents are accustomed to voting.
I see a question from Councilor Deering and then Councilor Lozon.
Yeah, thank you.
So my question is, why are we changing the petition due dates for city candidates when we're having an election in March anyway?
So we talked to the city attorney about this, and the city attorney advised us that it would be that we would have to move both the budget vote and city election, elections for city officials. So a move to a town meeting day of May 14th would not just be for the budget; it would be for mayoral, councilor, clerk elections as well. Which that's why the petitions would move to that date.
And is that in statute that says that?
Our charter says that these are the things that happen at our annual meeting,
Okay.
and they all happen at the same time. So we couldn't split them up.
Got it.
So, and it would also include the charter changes and anything else that would be included on the city's warning.
Got it.
For
Okay.
the annual meeting.
Councilor Lozon, then Councilor Booten.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to be clear, because you kind of skimmed right over it.
Yeah.
This is going back one slide. This is what you're recommending to the council?
Yes, this is my recommendation to the council, and we believe that it would just provide a wealth of more data, no pun intended, I guess, but just give us way more data to craft a more credible, realistic budget that we can present to the voters. I think there would be a lot of unknowns presenting a budget to the voter, warning a budget on January 30th. In fact, we could be in a position where we're warning a budget on January 30th that's not consistent anymore with what we know from the state level. So we believe that by shifting the town meeting day this year to May, given the unique circumstances of our dependence on external financial assistance, will help us craft a much better product.
Councilor Booton and Councilor Stockwell.
Wait,
He's not
I
done.
mean, just
yeah.
as a comment, it kind of makes sense. I mean, we're learning, I get more information every week from you, so yeah, I guess this will be an interesting discussion, but yeah.
Why couldn't we just warn that we're gonna collect a certain amount of money versus warning the actual budget? In this way, we can be a little nimble when it comes to the budget and state that, you know, if we don't get the money, then we do the draconian cuts. I'll be honest with you, I'm not overly excited about the 14th after that conversation. Although I do like the idea of keeping Carol on forcibly for an extra couple months.
I feel the love.
Well, I mean, I've already started the petition for Carol, so.
Remember, I have to sign the consent of candidate form. Ain't gonna happen.
Sure, I think we can look at all the signatures that you had. No, but seriously.
Could we go forward one slide?
Sure.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Sorry, wrong computer. It's
must
not,
be,
it's yeah, it's
taking a
low.
little bit.
There we go.
But instead of voting on the budget, we vote on an amount to be collected in taxes. Do we have the ability to do that?
So let me go to the next
You're
slide.
jumping a slide,
Yeah.
Michael.
Okay.
So how does Barre City warn the budget article on the ballot?
Councilor Stockwell, did you have a question about the town meeting date item?
Well, I had a question about what we would know. If we change the date, what would we know? So for external financial assistance, we might know about FEMA, and we
No,
also,
it's the state.
so this is just,
Yeah,
and it's likely that this will happen on that timeline?
we may.
Possible.
I think we'll-
Legislature doesn't adjourn until May
Right, right, I
generally,
get that, yeah.
but it would be better than January.
Yeah, that's our calculus. Our calculus is that no matter what, we'll know more. And it's April 9th when we'd have to warn it. So we'll know more on April 9th than we'll know on January 30th.
Right.
So that's, and not only from the state, but we'll know more of we'll have way more data from our year-to-dates as well. And so it'll, both pieces, the state side, the city side, will be more, there'll just be more better data to make a better decision about a more realistic budget. It may not be a better budget, but it'll be way more realistic. And I think that part of what we took away from last week's meeting was I think we run the risk of warning a really confusing situation for voters. Certainly if we do it in January, so early, so far away from when we'll have some predictability. And that's, I think, Councilor Bruton, to your point a little bit, I think the warning may not change very much, and you're right that I can jump ahead just so everyone can see it. Our warning, the warning that we use is, I think, already suitable to the situation we're facing. This is the exact text of the warning from last year's ballot, which I'll just read it out loud. It's, shall the Barre City voters authorize a general fund budget of 13 million, of which an amount not to exceed 10 million is to be raised by local property taxes for the fiscal year July 1, 23 through June 30, 24. So, here what we would still be able to authorize a budget that assumes some state money, and we could authorize that budget not raising a certain amount of, or only raising a certain amount of property taxes. That won't really change from January to April when we have to warn it. But between January and April, those numbers, the 13 million, the 10 million, will become way more realistic. And we'll know, I think we'll be able to provide a clearer picture of what residents will be voting on.
Carol, please.
Well, my take on the town meeting, going back to the town meeting timeline, is that we already have to hold an election on the 5th. The school board's going to be there. Another election is likely to reduce voter turnout and engagement in the process. I think what I think a lot of people want is stability and clarity, and using the same warning language we use every year seems like that offers stability. And to me, it's really bad precedent to use that charter language because it opens up manipulation by city councils to move elections around all over the place. I just think it's a really bad provision. It's inconsistent with section 202 of the charter, which explicitly states that the meeting shall be held on March 5th. And I'm not likely to support moving the town meeting date. And also, there's no guarantee that there would be any resolution from the legislature. If anything is like the past 2 years, the budget bill will be vetoed. There will have to be a veto session, and it's likely going to require a 2/3 majority to override it. That might not even happen before the fiscal year begins. The only way that there's real clarity is if there's something in the Budget Adjustment Act. So if it's not in the governor's budget and there's no bill targeting the Budget Adjustment Act, January, the first week of the legislative session, I think we're unlikely to have any clarity around aid. And we'll know that well before January 30th. There's always more time, always lends more clarity. It's always good to know what your grand list is going to be, because then you would know what the clarity of the tax rate increase is. But the tradition in Vermont and most municipalities is to still go forward on the first Tuesday in March. And I think if we're going to change that, we need to have a much bigger governance conversation about this. I'd also think, since this wasn't in the packet and it's not on the agenda and it's a huge policy decision, I think any decision by this body tonight would be out of order on the question of when a town meeting is going to be held.
Well, we can't. I mean, it's not warned. So we got to talk about it later, but I'd be interested in hearing from Carol.
I think that we're in a unique year. And I think that having the opportunity to have additional time to get firmer numbers and to see how the winds are blowing at the legislature, there's a lot of value to that. I certainly understand the value of staying with tradition, staying with the first Tuesday in March. We have to hold an election that day anyway. But I think for the city's benefit, that it would be a good thing to have the opportunity to have a couple more months of data, of opportunity to advocate on our behalves at the State House. I think there's real merit in it. We've got a little bit of time to talk about it, but I think it's worth considering.
Councilor Booton?
So, I mean, regarding talking about it, for those that are getting their petitions, they would have to modify it and then get additional signatures from.
You'd have to start over.
Correct. So that's one thing to think about. And I personally, one, I haven't started, so it doesn't affect me, and now I'll get for both dates. However, I don't like the idea of moving I think we should, if we're gonna do the budget, we just do it, what we want. If it fails, then we can do it in May. At that point, we can do it in May, and then we'll have more information. But I'm not a big fan of moving our elections to May 14th. And, when we have that conversation, I will be vehemently against it. Even though I would love to keep Carol on for another 2 months.
We all would.
So now on to the budget. Councilor Lozon?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to I need to think about it. Having been through a number of budget cycles at the legislature, there are, I think the additional time would be beneficial. I think there's certainly going to be a level of flood relief. As I've spoken with committee chairs, with the administration, there's certainly going to be a level of flood relief to municipalities. What obviously the devil will be in the details, and that will be, a debated issue in the legislature. I don't know that I necessarily agree with you, Mayor, that we'll have specific clarity on that issue by January 30th. I think there is going to be some level of assistance to municipalities, but like a lot of things in the budget, there are things that by January 30th, we know are DOA, that they're just not going to make it through. There are always things in the budget that we know are going to make it through. And there are things in the budget that we know are going to be debated, and the level will be decided at a later date. I think that flood relief to municipalities fits in that latter category, and it depends on how some other conversations play out. What I do know is that three people who I respect and whose job it is, for all intents and purposes, to run the city, are recommending that we provide them additional time and move the date of the election to May 14th. And I don't think that's a question of, it's not, to me, it's not, as Carol said, this is a very unique year. I don't see it as any sort of political manipulation or it's simply an attempt to try to put the best information we have in front of the council and in front of the voters. So what I'd like to do is just maybe put it on the agenda at the next meeting, and we can all have a few weeks to think about it, let it not ruin Christmas, and move forward from there.
Yeah, well, certainly could be on the agenda for
Perfect.
debate and
Thank you
discussion.
Very much.
And I do think, like, if there's something in the Budget Adjustment Act that we are likely to kind of know what that's going to look like
I agree.
by mid-January, even though it may not get governor's signature until March.
Correct.
But if something's in the general, the big bill for the July fiscal year start, that's a much, much bigger gamble. And I'm also, I think it's a big gamble to buy down the tax rate on a hope that the state will come through with aid. And it sounds like we're going to talk about how we can warn the budget language in such a way that the taxpayers could be insulated and know when they go to the polls that they're voting for certainty for well, not certainty, but a solid estimated tax rate increase, and that the total budget could account for state aid, and so that there's spending authority if it does come through. And if it doesn't come through, just like if fees don't come through or parking tickets don't come through, that's fine. But we're not buying down the tax rate and then setting up a fiscal cliff for next year. As I'd be very surprised. I mean, it'd be very awesome if we saw multi-year aid from the state. This is totally new territory, and I'd be surprised if there's that stick-to-itiveness across fiscal years as we enter a new biennium with new legislators and new crises popping up around the state. Councilor Booton?
Regarding the language, are we able to modify it?
Depends on what you're talking about for modification.
Shall the city?
We have to put a budget number in there.
You do have to.
Yes, because
Okay.
that's what our charter says.
Okay.
So
And I don't know if it applies to the city, but there was language for the school districts to modify their language in their warnings.
That was driven by
Just-
statute. They
Okay.
had to change the way they warned their ballot questions based on a change in statute.
Please continue. The silence is deafening.
those were the new questions we had. Other than that, we're ready for feedback or questions on the rest of the budget. So this is the rest of this PowerPoint is just I have it as reference. These are all topics we've covered for the last couple of weeks. We have some of the details in the back with the specific cuts. I would note one of the other areas, just as I land on this slide, that more time does help us with is the grand list, because Bill Krajewski would be able to do the permit reviews, which would update the grand list and hopefully help us with this number.
What's that starting number, Nicholas? I mean, last year was 5022.
Don, do you have it handy?
You have it handy, Don?
Our starting number was 504, 4032.
So 5 million, give or take, 5005, give or take. So we went down a little bit from 23, 24. And so looking at, and I warned you I was going to do this, so you're not surprised. So you were looking at a amount to be raised by taxes in the budget as presented, 11,303,530. That included the restoration of most of those cuts. Nicholas, is that correct?
Yes, that all of the cuts, all of the, not the overtime, sorry, all of them but the overtime.
Yeah, all but the overtime.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go back to the general fund balance, to the fund balance in the general fund, because I know, we've had some nerdy conversations about this. We had roughly a $500,000 fund balance, give or take.
600.
600. So we had about a $600,000 fund balance. We spent the cash, not necessarily the fund balance, but we spent the cash as a result of the flood. We had expenses that we had to cover, so we spent that 600,000. But you and I had a very short discussion at the last meeting. We didn't actually spend the fund balance. We just converted the fund balance to a receivable. And that, so that 600,000 that we're spending is actually in this fiscal year budget. Is that correct?
If we collect that money within 60 days after June 30th, 24.
Correct.
Then it
Which
can count.
we may or may not, but that's really
It's
a
accounting.
gap thing. That's a generally accepted accounting principles thing. So, but in reality, we just converted our $600,000 fund balance to a receivable, and we'll get it at some point. I don't think FEMA's going to stick us for it.
If we get it by the,
Well, one thing that I'm not sure of is the 400 to 500,000 that we spent on emergency cleanup.
Mm-hmm.
If FEMA will allow for that.
Gotcha. So again, additional time would provide clarity. No, I get all that.
The other thing.
The president raised the reimbursement rate from 75% to 100% for that 30-day period, but we haven't picked that date yet. Again, time will provide us with. So, and I was just fooling with the numbers because, for me, it's all about, well, where does the tax rate play out? So I took the 11,303,000 and I said, okay, well, what if we raise that through taxes? That is our number, which was your recommended number. We work hard, try to make 33% of those reductions permanent. So that $500,000 that, you were proposing to put back in the budget as presented, we take 160 out of that. So we make some hard choices over the next, 30 days or so. And then I leaned a bit on our fund balance. Obviously it's there for a reason. A fund balance is simply for unanticipated expenses. And certainly what happened in July of 23 was unanticipated. So the city has survived without a fund balance. It's not always the thing you like to do. It's like not having a savings account at home, but sometimes you have to burn up that savings account when something unexpected happens. So if we burned off that fund balance, so I took the 11, and I'm sorry, because I have these numbers in front of me and I'm a nerd and I'm an accountant. It's what I do for a living. So I'm sorry if I'm losing any of you or, but I took your 11,303, took off 160,000, took off another $500,000 using the fund balance.
So there's a $500,000 fund balance, you're saying?
Yeah, burning off. So basically taking our fund balance from 600 down to, virtually nothing.
The 160
which isn't-
permanent cuts, so
Yeah.
160 permanent cuts, 500 fund balance.
500.
11 million raised by taxes.
Yep, you got me. brings us down to, 10.6, kept the streets, sidewalk and equipment at the 403. That's moving on to the capital side of things. We asked the voters for 400,000. So I kept that the same. I didn't change that. I level funded that. And then the other ballot items that, which last year totaled 170 grand. Again, I didn't touch those. I kept those the same. Brought me down to 11,200,000 to look at the anticipated tax rate. I took 5,022. I'm a little off because you're starting at 5,005. And I reduced that by 5%, figuring because of flood-related damage, we lose 5% of our grand list. Brought me down to 4,771.
So even a more severe reduction in grand list.
I'm sorry?
An even more severe reduction. In
Could
grand
be,
list value.
could be. I heard Nicholas say 10 earlier. So, again, I could be off because I just didn't have a chance to connect with Nicholas or Carol or Dawn.
But all your presentations are based on 3.68.
Yeah, so it could be more. And that brought us down to, a tax rate, basically about a 5.5% increase, which I think is reasonable. Nicholas, you threw out 2 and change, I think, when you were doing a projected. And honestly, I think that's a little too aggressive. I think people have to expect, whether we do it in a one-time, a one-time 10-cent assessment, or whether we do it by saying, look, folks, as we recover from the flood, you can't expect a 3% increase in the tax rate. It's going to have to be more.
So you're saying it's 5.5 increase in the tax rate, not in the budget?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's not, again, I wish I had more clarity on a lot of these items that, as you pointed out, Dawn, time will fix. But I actually felt a little bit better about where we are going through the exercise than I did after last week's meeting. So as I talked to you about it, and I'm sorry, I'm going to speak directly to you, Dawn, because you and I speak the same language. Was there anything in there that you think I missed or I'm way off on, or?
You weren't off on anything. My only concern about cutting or level funding the capital allocation is we know how that situation always ends up. So it's not a big difference.
Yep.
But 3% is 3%. So.
And how big a hit did we take on, or do we know yet, Carol, on sales and use tax, or did we take any at all?
Well, it's a little deceiving, the most recent payment that we got from the state, because they typically have been really firm on the quarterly basis, but for some reason, the one we just got had like an extra 5 weeks attached to it. So it's a little hard to, and I don't know whether, the state has been really good about fronting money, like all our street money came early, and the pilot, they've been good about getting cash in the hands of municipalities. So I don't know if maybe that's part of it, because, the reporting periods are a quarter. So I don't understand, and it's a little difficult to get information out of the Department of Taxes. So it's hard to compare apples to apples. It looks like it's comparable to other quarters, but because it's actually higher than the last quarter we had, but it also has extra weeks in it. So it's a little hard.
It does not look like we, at least on his face, it doesn't look like.
It doesn't look like there was
we took
any
a hit.
kind of, yeah.
So, yeah.
So Tom, under that, what would the budget percent increase be?
I mean, give or take, don't hold me to a number. Everything I just went through, about 5.5.
So 5.5%.
Oh, I'm sorry, budget, I'm sorry. I always relate everything back to tax rate.
Yeah.
Tax rate, 5.5.
Yeah, but the budget, yeah, that's what I was wondering, like, what's the percent budget?
100 and the total budget expenditure, I only adjusted by 160,000, which was taking, if you look on page way towards the end of the manager's handout, he had a $426,000 add back number. It wasn't attached to anything specific. It was restoration of budget cuts, and it was just I think the number, Jake, I'm sorry. I think it was
478. 478.
Thank you. So it was 500,000, just let's round it, make the math easy. I took that 500,000 and reduced it by 160,000. So the only expenditure adjustment I made was $160,000.
So we'd still be like more in like an 8% budget increase.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't see how,
I mean,
a lot of things I don't like, but I don't, I think Dawn and Nicholas have done a good job at presenting the council with options and presenting us with a budget that maintains, essential services. And it's not like it's the first time we've been here. I mean, at the end of the day, we have a city to run, and you can try to cut your way to a lesser number. But in my opinion, it doesn't really set the city up for success, in the future. So I think our citizens have to expect to see a 10% tax increase. Nothing I'd vote for. But
then why would you put it on the ballot if you're not going to vote for it?
10% tax increase is nothing I would vote for. If we could get, I think, again, looking at Nicholas's number, I think you were 2 and change, Nicholas. I think in a year as extraordinary as this year has been, I think our citizens have to expect something more than 2%, which isn't even equal to the rate of inflation. So, yeah, I mean, it's all just a discussion. There's no right or wrong. It's just about preferences and experience and, reasonable assumptions.
I would just say that it's, for us, it's super helpful to have the discussion about what the acceptable tax rate is, because I think that's one of the things we've been struggling with. And so I think I really appreciate knowing sort of what the flexibility might be on that front, because knowing.
Well,
and
that's not a money back guarantee.
No,
I've been wrong plenty of times.
Of course.
So.
No, but I think if we have that's the kind of feedback that to us is very helpful, because then we can start, not tying anyone to any specific number, but if we, Don and myself and Carol can work with a 5% or a 5.5%, whatever the case may be, and that gives us even more options. I think the only comment that occurred to me was the fund balance, which I think is maybe not set in stone based on the timing and whether we're going to get it back from FEMA, because a lot of that was for emergency debris, which even though it's 100% reimbursed, may not be approved by FEMA.
So the 686 and whatever, give or take, is set in stone because that's 23.
Okay, good.
Right.
So that got it. We were talking about so the FEMA issue on the reimbursement is not an issue in terms of an assumption for that a resource in 25.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
And remember, Nicholas, I didn't adjust for state assistance.
Got it.
So I would be so disappointed if the state did not provide. So again, I burned through our fund balance. I'm not a big fan of that. You don't spend your savings account down to zero. Right. But I didn't allow for any state assistance at all. I would be so disappointed if the city of Barre, given the level of damage that occurred in the city of Barre versus other communities, and I know Montpelier is hurting too, but if you look at, we heard Mr. Farnham sit here and talk about the level of damage in Barre City as compared to other communities. I would be so disappointed if we did not see, I'd be upset if we did not see $500,000 in flood assistance money. I'm hopeful that it's much more than that, but I can't imagine it being less than 500,000. So even in the scenario that I just ran through, where I landed on a 5.26% tax increase, I didn't include any state assistance. I rather said, okay, let's burn through our fund balance. That's not my first choice. That's, again, trying to respond to your comments, Jake, that, okay, let's not count on money that, let's only count on money that we can touch.
Yeah, and I would even be more conservative than you, Tom, and that looking at the consumer price index for the last 12 months for New England, it's at 2.9%. But when you look at our own numbers, salary, wages, employee-related taxes, that's a 5.42 increase. CBA or the pensions, 6.56, workers' comp, property casual insurance, 10.2, and then those average fixed at 6.94. I'd be comfortable with 5%, potentially up to 5% on the tax rate, not assuming state aid, but to warn the budget in such a way that there's spending authority for state aid. So if it comes through, then you can restore cuts. But right now we're a household that has lost income, but we have a whole lot of expenses. We have to pay the cable bill and the garbage bill, or the rent, the mortgage, and we bought a Powerball ticket hoping that we're going to be able to maintain our home on outside aid. That may or may not come through, and so I think we might need to be ready to make those cuts in case it doesn't come through, and to warn a ballot item that gives the voters assurance that we might have to shrink city government or be much more strategic about how things get spent, and that could include making some really hard changes that I'm sure none of us are keen to do, but spending down our savings account or relying on outside aid over multiple years is too much risk for me, and I think too much risk for a lot of people in the city. So
I didn't count on state aid. That's specifically, and that is specifically why fund balances are there.
But that's part of the discussion we're having. So
Absolutely.
One other thing to keep in mind with regards to fund balance is that we're likely going to end up in the red for 24, which will eat up a bunch of that fund balance, mainly because of loss of revenue around abatements. And so that will obviously have an impact on how much money is available to go into 25.
Do we have our 23 fund balance yet? Or do we have any clue where we ended up in June 30th to 23?
Or unassigned or in total? Unassigned or in total?
Unassigned.
Unassigned was in the 680.
Range. So that's the total, or that's the result of, we must have ended up in the black in June 30th to 23.
For the fiscal year, we did not.
We did not for June 30th to 23?
No.
Ooh.
We were 109,000 in the red.
But we ended up with a fund balance total of 680.
Right.
Gotcha.
That's unassigned. We all have.
Nope. I remember the discussion. We lost that one. Bet you wish we had kept it in there.
in terms of like getting the big picture briefing, is the expectation that comes to council through the audit? Or are we going to get updates on what our bond status is, where our enterprise fund budgets are, where the capital budget needs to come in the next month, and then the different I think you're talking about the balance statements for, that's a point in time.
Yeah, normally that comes, usually the audit is presented around this time, and I just have not had the time to do the final report. It's been audited, all the numbers are final. I just haven't had time to put the whole audit report together.
Yeah.
But I'm comfortable in the number that I told you of the 686 unassigned. So all that information that you just said would be covered in the audit report. However, we're 6 months into the new year, which those numbers have already, changed, and not for the better.
Can we get a financial, you brought up 23. Can we get a update, even if it's a rough set of financial statements, realizing they're unadjusted? Could we get something through December 31st of 2023? Soon after December 31st, just so we can kind of see, Carol brought up an interesting point. We don't know what our red ink in 2023 year to date looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely send you our budget to actuals.
Yeah, understanding that you haven't played with it yet, so
I haven't looked at 24 much.
it's all good.
I can tell you right now, as of the end of November, we had spent 1.7 million in flood expenses. So that's outside of any money, any budget
At all.
at all.
Yikes.
Yikes.
Of which 75% is going to be reimbursed,
We hope.
or so they,
So
well,
it
I
should
mean,
be nine-
it's
it should be
it's
90%.
reimbursement eligible.
Because the state meets a certain damage threshold, they're eligible for 90% refunded. Pretty confident that we would get 90% of the majority. It's that emergency cleanup that I'm not confident that we're gonna get the money back on that.
Gotcha.
So that's maybe, like I said, 450,000.
But we bumped from 75 to 100. We've got a 30-day period that we got to pick. And obviously we got to be judicious about how we assign that 30-day period. Is that calendar, or is that?
I think the state picks
governor
that.
picks
Yeah,
that.
the
I think
governor.
The state picks that 30-day. I don't think
Yeah, it's a statewide designation.
Right. Okay. So that state, well, that was a presidential executive order, correct?
Yeah.
So when we pick the 30 days, and I'm sorry, this is just a nerd question, it's not even relevant to our conversation. Can you pick any 30 days you want? Could you go from like the 14th to the 13th? Can you pick any 30 days, or does it have to be a month?
I don't know, because I think VEM selects the dates.
I thought
Yeah.
VEM was.
It's not specific to Barre. It's just a statewide.
Yeah, it's
number.
everybody.
So, yeah. So they pick. What they do is, as we understood it, the state was collecting a lot of data from us on when our damage happened, and trying to, as you said, Councilor Lozon, maximize the amount of projects that would get that 100% reimbursement. So
Okay.
it's not one that we picked, but we were. For example, one of the ways we were trying to make sure we caught into that was usually the first 30 days are the worst when most of the money is spent. So we were rushing to get some of our big projects done within 30 days of the flood, like the Portland Street demolition.
Mm-hmm.
So FEMA was on us, like, you should do this before the 30 days from the flood expires on whatever date it was. And they said you should get this done before then, because we expect that will fall within the 30 days that the governor selects.
I get you.
For that, yeah.
Thank you.
The big picture, though, we think there's going to be reimbursements, but there's probably going to be a portion that's not reimbursed. We'll have to eat that. We have the $3 million in bond to carry the cash balance right now, right? But it's still
Line of credit, yeah.
Yeah, it's just line of
Yeah,
credit.
line of
And
credit, I'm sorry,
we've
yeah.
got something that'll probably fall in the $150,000 to $200,000 range with regards to abatements. We don't know, I know what the total tax value is on those properties. We've already done the ones that are gonna be 100%, so the rest of them will be a percentage, but the total at the moment is about 350,000. My guess is we're going to be looking at something half or a little less than that, but that too will have a negative impact on, that's tax revenue that we had counted on as part of our budget.
So, Carol, the thing you said yesterday about we can't spend more than the budget that was warned, how did we accrue all these expenses if there was no budget to, I must not be misunderstanding something there. So,
Well, first of all, it's what your numbers look like at the end of the year.
okay.
So, we spend things well in advance of collecting taxes, since our taxes don't come in, totally until May. That's part of it, but then there is flexibility associated with emergencies. So,
I just want to clarify something too that I said earlier about fiscal '23 ending in the red. On paper it did, but in reality, there was the cops grant, a couple other police grants that, because the flood hit in July, that delayed our submission. So we couldn't recognize that as revenue because we didn't collect it in that 60 days. So that will
Gotcha.
come to us in '24. So it's not as, we would have been in the black if that would have went according to plan.
So does that revenue push forward to '24?
Yep.
So either way, it's
Either
all hitting
way,
the fund balance
but
at some
yeah,
point.
I just wanted to make sure that
No,
you guys
thank
didn't
you.
know that we spent erroneously or something. It was all timing because of the flood.
I don't know if tonight's the time to do this, but I was planning to go through the line budget. I have questions about different things that are changing. And I don't know if that's the thing to do tonight or at a future meeting, but I have my notes, so.
Happy to, yeah.
We could, or I recommend, because you would have all the
Budget
department
seminar.
heads
Yeah,
at the,
the
this
9th.
is the 9th meeting that we go line by line.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, if there's a program
If
specific
there's,
one.
yeah, if there's something specific.
Would it be more helpful? I had a few, and I'm fine. We don't need to go into it tonight, but would it be more helpful, Don, if I forwarded my questions to you and Nicholas in advance?
That'd be great.
Okay, I'll do that.
I can do that.
Happy to do that.
Yeah, I think for us, as I mentioned, I think sort of the conversation we had about prospective tax rates, I think that gives us a lot of something to work with. I heard 5% twice, so I think that gives us something to craft up that's consistent with this discussion, and we can see what that looks like. That obviously buys back some of the cuts we've proposed, but that to me was the most helpful part of the conversation, is knowing what the tolerance is on the council, because obviously it's a lot of work that goes into it's a lot of lines in this budget. So if we have a pretty confident sense of where there's tolerance for accepting where the taxes land, we can come up with, I think, a really responsible, credible budget that is responsive to that.
Mr. Stockwell.
Is it possible to limit voter-approved assistance, or is that so written that we cannot?
The only way we could do it is we could, when did I have this discussion?
We had
This
it
morning.
today. We had it today.
So, based on Barre City's policy, those organizations that currently have voter-approved assistance are able to submit an application and a letter requesting to be on the ballot for level funding next year, this coming March. And we could change the policy so that everybody had to go out to petition instead of just placing them on the ballot. The challenge with that is, as soon as we open it up and tell everybody they have to petition, they all will, and they'll all increase. They will put together joint petitions where all 22 organizations are listed, because that's allowed by statute. They'll each go out and collect their 35 signatures to get the total 600 plus that they need, and they'll all increase their asks by 50%. And so, but once we get those petitions, unless we can say without a shadow of a doubt that they provide no services to the city of Barre, they would go on the ballot.
But could we change the policy so that we limit the amount they could request, not who could request, or?
No.
No.
Okay, that's worth a try.
Good question.
I mean,
but-
you could build a policy that says you can only ask for X, but they would then turn around and say, fine, we'll petition, because the right to petition is protected in statute.
If thinking back, Mayor Herring asked me to write our current policy, which I did, which was designed to make it the hurdle a little higher. However, the council has consistently ignored the petition requirements and put the B8, like last year, put BADC on the ballot without the petition signatures necessary.
And Washington County Mental Health.
Yeah. So a policy is only as good as the political will of this body. or a chair that's willing to call something out of order for not following. And I regret not doing that last year, but I am noticing there's a 25% decrease forecasted in voter approved assistance. So how does that work?
That's because based on conversations on Green Mountain Transit, we've moved their allocation from voter approved assistance into a line in the budget.
And so does this 111,200 include the $20,000 that we're paying in Barre Town? Isn't
It does not.
Okay, all right, got it. Council Booten?
Regarding that policy, and I know it's not right time, I actually have gotten multiple complaints about the policy and how even though it makes the ballot really, really long, we should be listing them out.
Separately, yeah.
We should, listing them one by one.
One by one, because
Yeah.
people like to be able to pick and choose what they want. And frankly, I do too.
Want to do that before the town meeting?
Yeah.
Oh,
but-
list them.
Just to be, couple things.
I know, I'm
First of all,
sorry.
sure, we'll list them all individually and they'll all pass because they always all pass.
No.
And we'll pay more for our ballots because a longer ballot costs more money.
Yeah. And this, thank you, Mayor, if I could, I wanted to react to something you said last week, Nicholas. I am lukewarm at best. You talked about going back and renegotiating contracts with employees. I'm really lukewarm on that. I'm somebody who believes that your word is your bond. We negotiated those contracts in good faith. Public Works, Public Safety, they all stepped up and did a great job during the flood. They served the city well. We're a city of 8,000 people, and to ask a few hundred to, to chip in to a greater extent than others, that didn't sit well with me. Renegotiating contracts under after the fact, I realize that it happens at times, but just wanted to let you know in advance, just so nobody's surprised. Not a big fan. We can solve our own problems without putting them on the backs of employees who have done a good job.
Council Booten?
So,
And Councilor Stockwell?
No, Sarah Hellman's had her hand up.
Okay.
I would disagree with you as long as it's not affecting the pay. Modifying union contract, because you weren't really discussing pay. I mean,
that would be like a last resort. I think what we were looking at was some overtime. Our overtime is way out of control, and a lot of it's driven by contract provisions. I think, and yeah, Councilor Lozon, I agree with you in principle. I think what we were presenting last week is if we were targeting a specific tax rate increase, we were making certain assumptions about aid or not. And so mathematically, if we were still doing that, there was no way to get there without getting at that 68% of the pie. And even if we eliminated all the department heads, we wouldn't get there without getting to the union contract. So it's absolutely a last resort. I think if we're looking at a 5% target, I think a lot of that goes away.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that, touching salaries would be a no. But positions change all the time. And I understand, especially when you're facing economic troubles. During 2020, there was a pretty large layoff at National Life. My position was moved to a different position. So that lukewarm would, for changes in salary, I would be very, very cold. But for changes in how work is done, I would be extremely warm on, like hot under the collar.
Sarah Hellman?
I'm just curious for some historical perspective. I mean, this isn't the first time that Barre has flooded. Maybe this was worse than the other times. I'm just curious in context how I wasn't involved in the city government at the time, attending meetings. I'm just curious what the historical perspective is in comparison.
Dollars, you want to take that one?
It was considerably worse than last time, than the last ones. I mean, I was around for the 2015 flooding, for the 2011 flooding. And the scope of the damage is considerably more this time around. And the extent of the damage is much higher. So the impact on the grand list is much higher. So it definitely, I mean, there were impacts the last time around, the last couple times around, but nothing to this extent.
Yeah, easily, Sarah, easily 5 times more. You know, we were dealing back in both 11 and 15, we were dealing with a few $100,000, you know, 250, 300,000. I mean, the number just wasn't that big. It certainly didn't approach or exceed 7 figures and did not have a significant permanent effect on the grand list. So just a much, much bigger problem in 23 than we faced in 15 and 11.
Thank you. It's helpful to know.
For the hiring freeze, are all, how many positions is that anticipated to affect?
9.5.
Are all the personnel and benefits based on current staff levels, or do those anticipate the hiring freeze impacts?
So we, it's 9.5, 10.5 positions. I 10.5, I think. One of those.
Pulling it up. Hold on.
Yeah.
I mean, continue, but.
So we assume the savings of the wages plus the benefits were it to become necessary. That's what the 740. That's where the estimate of the $740,000 in savings would come from. Now, again, that's why this conversation was helpful, because if we're looking at a 5%, then again, that's something that may not be as necessary, or maybe one of the things that gets restored.
Counted about 8.
8, okay, yeah.
So 8 positions, and the personnel and benefits are based on that. They take into account the hiring freeze, 8 positions.
It's not in the spreadsheet. I don't think
It's not in the budget.
It's not
that
in
you're
the
looking
template.
at,
So
yeah.
that was, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Don. That was this hiring freeze was a contingency for again, targeting a 2.1% tax rate plus not getting external assistance. That was one of the tools we were going to use to make up that gap. So in a 5% world, that may not be necessary.
Or maybe we take a portion.
Or a
some
portion
the
of it.
cuts and some
Right.
of the freezes.
Yeah.
And the other thing I've been wondering about is, I know we have delegated authority to do building permits through our fire department. And I know other municipalities are handing and delegating authority back over to the state in some cases, because the revenues just don't cover the expenses, and the state can carry that cost for the municipality through the fire marshal program or through the water wastewater division. And how much of a net loss is our permitting program running at on the building code side?
Back to you on that one. I don't know.
I know you ran the numbers on the parking thing last year, and then we talked a little bit about that recently too. I'm just wondering about these, to Councilor Booton's point, how positions may be able to or need to shift the and perhaps we hand some things back over to the state that we've taken on, but we can't afford to take on anymore. So are there numbers, percent increases on either the budget or the tax rate that people would feel comfortable with as city councilors?
I'll just really shoot it. I mean, I think last year we really tried to shoot for about 5%. I think we felt comfortable with about a 5% increase budget. And you know, I think that kind of is a good point for me. I think seeing 10% increase is something that I can't support. But I think even a 2.5%, I think we might even be cutting too much. And I think that people have to be realistic and reasonable in what we have to expect. That the city just went through some serious devastation. People did as well, but we have to run the community as necessary to keep things the way they are, or they're going to get worse. We constantly see in our community how things aren't necessarily improving in ways that we want. And if we cut things that are going to be helping the quality of life of our citizens, you think about just the overall aura or ambiance of the community. If things look trashy, if things feel trashy because we can't afford to do them, then it's just going to contribute to that overall well-being and the mental health of our community. And people are going to want to go and do things that aren't necessarily of the best interest of the community. So I think that having some investment in the community is key, but we have to be fiscally responsible in the ways that we do that.
5% seems to me a fine place to shoot for. It seems reasonable. I do worry that we're going to cut services so severely, especially DPW, which we need more of and not less of.
I can agree with 5. I hate to see us go so low that we break the city.
One of the thoughts I had about Councilor Booton brought up when we were talking about mutual aid and another instance where we agreed was trying to track how much mutual aid we're giving versus receiving. I get really concerned about hearing about us always doing an emergency call or a dog run or whatever the case may be and not having any revenue on the other side of it. And if it's balanced, that's great. Then there's some fairness. But if we're subsidizing other communities that prefer a low tax rate and have very wealthy rural residential real estate homes, I'm not okay with that. And I think we need to relook at those, how we provide aid services to other communities. And if there is a billing or revenue opportunity, it might be time to have those hard conversations with the other municipalities, recognizing there are times, of course, that we need aid too. So, but who pays and who benefits? We gotta start thinking about that, and it can't just be Barre City residents paying for the region. So,
is that a conversation that you think we could have and have in place by June? I think that might be a hard conversation because mutual aid is exactly that. There's no one keeps track. So
well, Councilor Boone and I asked that Joe keep track. So I don't know if that's happening or not. So.
Right, but is he keeping track of how often other municipalities come to Barre or both? I'm not
I think
aware
that's
of
what's important. You can't if you don't measure, you can't manage it. And I want to know how much we're bleeding because I think we're bleeding.
So he is measuring it.
I don't know if he is measuring it, but I would say that I mean, mutual aid is mutual aid. We receive a lot of it. I think if you read recent press releases from the police department, yes, Officer Amos talked about doing dog runs in the town, but if you read the recent reports of press release by Chief Vale, Barre town officers were involved in the drug bust that we did in our city. So I think that it's easy to perhaps see when the mutual aid is going out. It's not as easy to see when it's coming in. I have a hard time. I think the flood taught me a lot. The first calls we got were from other municipalities for street sweepers, trucks, camels. So I think that I would have a hard time building a municipality for a disaster based on the response that especially after the response that we got.
We also had ambulance EMS crews from other cities came in and sat in our office or in our emergency dispatch office during the flood as our guys were out cleaning up, pumping out basements, that we didn't charge for. We didn't get, Waterbury was one of them. I can't remember if there was other ones, but that was a big savior.
I mean, I get it. I was there last year, 2 years ago. I think I would agree with the manager, and this would not be the time to, I mean, especially, well, given the fact that it worked out so well with us, probably would not be ever a good time. That being said, I think there's, yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
And I think we would be I don't think we get billed for other towns. We would be breaking the mold on that. So we would probably have to expect bills back. And so I'm not sure it would be a savings at the end.
Yeah, I'm not thinking, billing anybody. I'm not overly excited about that. But
It would be good to know. I mean, there's a lot of towns with no significant public safety personnel. They run on a volunteer basis. It'd be interesting to just start tracking how much is coming in, how much is going out, because you can't have a regional equity conversation if you don't measure it. And there should be regional equity. So,
Is there such a thing?
yeah, I'd say there is. I mean, I think it's built into policy.
It's all fair.
Well, if you
Interesting.
work for fairness, so.
Interesting.
should we move
So
on?
on the budget question, when we're talking 5%, just to be clear, we're talking 5% on the tax rate, or
That's what I heard.
okay, that does not assume state aid, but if the state aid comes, then we can restore cuts.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
I don't know. We got a lot of discussions to have. I don't know.
But it's a
I've got a lot
starting
to
kind
think
of
about.
concept.
It's a good starting point. We've got a lot to think about and a lot to consider over the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Was there anything else in your budget presentation that you wanted to?
No, I think that was, we did ask about cuts. I don't know if now's the time, and we can sort of take that on probably at the seminar as well, but the specific cuts, and it's probably better to talk about that once we come back with a 5% rate. So I think that's it.
Right, and we'll discuss the town meeting date next at a future meeting. So.
Yeah, and clerk does, I know the warning would have to happen for a March 5th town meeting day.
What we'll do is we have to warn the charter change first and second public hearing at next week's meeting. And, as long as we cover our base by approving that warning, we can always adjust it down the line, but we'll have our number, we'll have our initial dates approved.
Okay. And
With regards to charter changes, do we have counselors that are working on those proposed changes?
I know there's a couple of proposals, there's some
Things
language.
that have been suggested to me, but I don't know if there's a group that's actually working on the various and sundry things that have been sent around.
No,
So.
We can coordinate that maybe over the next week or so, what those are. I'm not even aware.
I know I did a couple drafts.
Yeah, I have Councilor Stockwell's proposals, but I think those are the only ones I'm aware of.
I've had a couple things sent to me and I've sent out some comments back on, but yeah.
Yeah.
Are you getting things that are in conflict with each other, or can they all?
No,
just be rolled
no,
up
it
as a
just,
package?
that's part of the discussion. There's too much on the list for them to be individual articles, because particularly if the ballot goes back to being as long as it was with individual articles for the voter approved funding. So there would have to be some picking and choosing, unless council had an interest in putting them out as a package to be approved, yes or no, as a package. That's the only way you can do it if you can't list them individually on the ballot, with each proposal having, the voters having an opportunity to say yes or no on each individual proposal. But
I think the last time we did a package, it failed, correct?
Not a fan.
Yeah, it's not a
Not a
popular
fan.
choice.
No. Is one of the suggestions about your position?
No, well, the idea's been floated about separating clerk and treasurer. It's the ones that I have, one of the ones I have is the 16 and 17-year-old voters. They're right, the residency on committees, which personally I think is more of an ordinance than or a policy than a charter change. And then we have a laundry list of them associated with getting references to the school out of the charter, because the school is now controlled by its own articles of agreement, and all the references to the school should be removed from the charter. And I've been trying to get the legislature to do that essentially administratively for the last 4 years but they finally have said, no, you're going to have to do it by going to the voters, which creates kind of a wormhole, because if the voters don't approve it, we're stuck with contradictory language. We've got language in charter that says A and language in the articles of agreement that says B. So, yeah.
Well, that's just dumb. Okay.
Who wins that one?
I've been having fun with that.
So the other question that was brought up was Representative Anthony's pilot proposal, is trying to reboot that again.
I ran some numbers, and the last time this went before voters, it was approved, and then there was a petition and it was overturned. The proposal was for having pilot payments for all exempt properties, except for city-owned, state-owned, federally owned, and school-owned properties. Everything else would pay a pilot based on 150% of their land value times the municipal tax rate. Looking at the grand list values as they currently exist, if we did that group, we're looking at something in the $400,000 range. If we took out all churches also, we drop down to about 150. So
It was a good idea. It was originally Peter Anthony's idea when he served as mayor. When I won the general election, I liked that idea. I thought it was fair, because even churches and nonprofits use our services. So I thought it was kind of a fair way to give them sort of a discount rate, if you will. It passed pretty handily.
the first time around.
At the March election, at the March election, it was my first election, was in March of 2007. Then all of the priests gave a nice sermon, and they told people, so they petitioned to revote it, the churches and all the nonprofits. And the priests gave a wonderful sermon saying that if you didn't go and defeat it in the special election, you were going to hell. And we lost big time. We crashed and burned. So I think it's fair. I would support it again, but I would predict that the result would be the same.
But it's worth a try. And
I'm okay with trying. I'm just telling you that it's a special election, and it's easier to rally people to support something or defeat something at a special election than it is to rally the general electorate. So, hey, I'd be all over putting it back on the ballot. I supported it 10 years ago, but just don't be surprised if you lose.
is it, Carol, is it somewhere on your site? Can I find the proposal?
For that particular,
Yes.
no. But if you look back at the election results from 2006 and then the overturn in 2007, that's when they happened.
Yeah, Father Leo was mad at me, and he and I have a deep affection for each other. I think he is an incredible man, and he was so angry with me when that passed. It was painful.
I will say the other properties that were excluded in that language, the initial language, were all the properties that already have pilot agreements with the city or are, have federally mandated, like Barre Housing Authority, Capstone, Downstreet, various things like that, so.
So what you need is your goal is to try to cull the list down versus having a really long ballot.
Well, it's just with, first of all, there is a limit as to how long our ballots can be, just physically, there's a limit to how long the ballot can be. And if we're listing each individual organization, that just makes it does make it longer. With regards to the charter, of course, they're wordy. All the charter changes are wordy. And if they get listed individually, then takes up a lot of space. And if there's a bunch of them, we have been successful in the past doing, 2, maybe 3 and fitting them on a ballot as individual questions. Again, depending on how long they are. The statutes do allow you to lump them all together and essentially just put a question on that says, shall the voters approve the charter changes as presented? And then you are required to mail copies of the charter changes out with any mail ballots or provide them to anybody voting absentee or early. You have to post them in each voting booth at the polls so that the public has them to reference when they're considering the question. But as a general rule, what happens is they see this ledger-sized sheet of paper with like 9-point type on it, and they vote no. It's a hard, and they like this, but not this, and this, and not this, so they vote no. So.
Carolyn, I was the chair of the charter committee in Colchester, and Karen Richards warned charter amendments, and there were some that were as a package, and I recall some were separated out. They weren't in the ballot language, but everybody had in the polling station or with their absentee ballot just 8.5 by 11 printouts of the markup language, although it wasn't in the ballot itself. Do you think that has the law changed that disallows that?
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay, all right, okay. So it doesn't have to be all yes or no for a whole package.
Yes, my understanding from my conversations with our bond counsel is that if you're putting any charter changes on the ballot, they either need to all be listed individually, or if you're lumping some together, you have to lump all of them together.
Okay.
But I can confirm that.
Okay. Yeah, I think Clerk Richards, when we were going through it, did it where there was a lot of individual questions, and some people voted yes and some people voted no on stuff, but it definitely makes for an unwieldy ballot. All right, so we're gonna have some more budget meetings starting in January. And then anybody that has questions on their line by line review or budget lines can send them to Dawn and you, or just you, or whatever, both. And so that those answers can come back. Are there any other loose ends here?
No, I think that's it. On the 19th next week, the ADC partnership and Aldrich Library have been invited to come discuss their budget requests. So that'll be the budget topic for next week. And
did you invite GMT if you're listing them separately too?
No, we did not, because it's the same amount.
Same amount.
Yeah.
Which they've been at
on the
that
ballot
amount for 15 years or more.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And yeah, and I guess the only other question for me is the discussion on the potential delay of the date. We want to do that in January, give people some more time to think about that. Is that correct? Is that the time?
Yes,
I got?
please.
Okay. Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, so next up is the LOI for the development of the Seminary Street parking lot.
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor, and Tess is here, can help me answer questions. This is responsive to a couple weeks of discussions we've had about potential redevelopment of Seminary Street lot. After working with Tess, Clerk Dawes, and Janet, we came up with a pretty, straightforward first round letter of invitation for of interested developers. We wanted to cast a wide net to see what was out there. And the idea being that we would leave this letter of invitation open until March 1st, hopefully get some compelling, creative offers. And then after review of those letters of interest, advance hopefully multiple interesting offers to a more rigorous second round with a more in-depth proposal to follow that. So that's really it here. As I said, we kept it simple because we don't want to limit what we get back. We want people to be creative. It's a 0.41 acre parcel of land in downtown Barre that is close to services, food, transportation. And so we want to get some creative offers, and that's why we're breaking this into a 2-round process with a casting the net and then sort of filtering from there. So Tess, is there anything else you would add to that? I think that was.
No, I'm just, I feel like I'm gonna need help, and you probably have a lot of resources about, how to cast that net widely. Figure that. So if there's any suggestions around that, would be great.
Yep. So we're ready to post this. It's ready to go live on the website. If there's anything that councilors think is missing, that should be added, timing, whatever it is.
One thing is Janet is compiling a list of little background information that wouldn't be in there that we can have when we have it on the final site. We are click this link and have lots of different information that might be questions asked.
And I'm wondering if we can develop criteria for when we get proposals in. That says like it's a pathway to condo ownership, or that would be a criteria that would be important, that it's 20 to 25% affordable, which would include third-party vendors, so Section 8 or nonprofits. So we develop some criteria for looking at proposals that the council agrees on.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine with us. I think we'd want to we wouldn't want to limit anything that might come in. So I think having it as a criteria on the back end to score the proposals is fine. But we definitely want to be open-ended in terms of letting people be creative. And who knows, somebody may have an idea out there that we may unintentionally preclude by putting too much on there. So that's the idea of opening it up to that second round with more intensive review.
Yes, that seems fine.
Yeah.
Is there a way that we can say we really would like to see some small developers, that we'd like to give small developers a chance to?
This will probably be a big.
Not part
complex
of the
one,
letter,
though.
but.
Yeah, my gut, I'm sorry to jump in, but I feel like this is probably going to be a big complex site, this one.
Okay.
But the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission infill study, the evaluation that they're doing to identify sites around the city for prospective development, I think would be a really good basis to look at, to connect small scale developers with developable land and opportunities throughout the city.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't put that in the letter of interest, but Councilor Lozon, how long did we, for the property next to Spa, for City Place, how long did we post that out there?
Well, that was first of all, that was a different type of project. And for those of you who might be wondering, no, I'll be sitting this one out. I've been told in no uncertain terms that we have a wedding to pull off in May of 2024, and that's where 100% of my focus needs to be. So it was that process. It was a little different, Counselor. The city actually purchased that property, that building, under the Neighborhood Stabilization Program So it was kind of different. It wasn't very long. It was only 60 days or so. And the only thing that I'd like to see changed here, Nicholas, is where it says the city plans to sell the lot to a selected developer for $1. Maybe we could say something like the city will consider a reduced purchase, the successful applicant may be offered a significantly reduced price. I don't want to commit, because when you get to the point where you're actually saying to someone, okay, give us your plan, you may have a developer who says, look, I'll give you 50,000 for the land and this is what I want to do. And I don't want to tie the city. I don't want to forego what could be a revenue opportunity for the city. Yep. Even 25,000, hey, it buys a police cruiser. So, something. So maybe if we could just soften that language a bit, saying, look, we're open to anything. And this is just a letter of interest, right, Tess? So could we shorten the time frame a little bit? Maybe say February 15th? Yeah. Mostly because I'm just anxious to see what the possibilities are. And because we're not asking for financing documents, we're not asking for as-built, we're just saying, hey, let us know who you are and what you're thinking. Yep. Maybe we could just shorten it up a little bit and maybe generate a little bit of excitement and positivity prior to town meeting day.
Just do the 16th, which is a Friday, if that's okay. Perfect. With you.
The day after taxes are due.
That's February, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything. The important dates are March 15th and April 15th. Unless they extend it like the IRS has done for the last 2 damn years. And if they do that, guess what? You're going to be having a retirement party for me this year.
So one thing, like, I think we learned about with the ARPA process and getting out calls, it's like, I feel like we did a lot of flying the airplane while we were, building the airplane while we were flying it. And it wasn't necessarily a great experience for our applicants. And I think, developers like to know what to expect. They like predictability. They want to understand the process. They want to understand, what's at least the allowable zoning right now, how much flexibility there would be with that, what policy tools might be available, like if the information packet includes the tax stabilization policy or the tax increment financing district, what's potentially in play there. So the one thing that worries me is that, not seeing like a full process written out. I just don't want to waste people's time. I don't want to be building criteria and always moving the goalpost. So it feels like it's good to cast a wide net, but on the other hand, making sure that we have really good communication in place so that people's expectations are managed and that the customer service experience is a really positive one, I think is important. So in terms of like changes to the form, it would be nice to have like, what can you expect as next steps on the city? When can you expect a response? What other subsequent phases is this thing going to go through? A link to the zoning or a zoning sheet about what the zoning district allows, and a note that we're looking at potential zoning changes right now. A link to our, I don't think we have a link to the TIF plan. That might not be helpful, but at least an acknowledgement that we have a TIF district. There is some bonding capacity. There is this timeline associated with that. And I think I'd also want to see any disclosure of potential or perceived conflicts of interest with either city staff or people on council from respondents, so that we know up front if there's conflicts of interest in play.
On the part of applicants?
Yes.
That's not where the responsibility lies.
Well, that's what I'm asking them.
Responsibility
I'm asking
lies
them if
with
like, if
individual members
somebody's a
of council
developer.
and city staff to
Yeah.
specifically identify any conflicts of interest. So, for example, if
I'm just saying.
Carol had a conflict
if
of interest,
somebody's
she would have a
responding to this and
she
Council
would have a
Booten's their cousin,
responsibility to
then
identify that
They could
conflict.
identify that Council Booten's their cousin, or that they have a financial relationship with a member of council. It's not onerous to ask that.
It actually is. But we can agree to disagree.
Well,
Once again.
I think, making sure that we avoid those conflicts. I don't want to be in a situation again like the Wheelock House. I just don't want to repeat that.
Where was the conflict?
And where a member of city
I
council.
don't recall that there was an undisclosed conflict.
Yeah.
Was there?
At any rate, I want things to be, have a full trust.
I'm with you, Counselor.
So, well, Tom, this is just where I am on conflicts of interest. So,
And it's actually fairly standard to say, when we get to the second phase, do you have a conflict of interest as part of their application? That's not like a odd idea. It's a fairly common idea.
yeah, Tess.
So I'll just say some of those things that you mentioned, Mayor, Janet, like I said, Janet is compiling much more background information, so that, and that would be the link that is mentioned in this article. So that that'll be there, plus phone numbers to call.
Okay,
Yeah, so I think
perfect.
I'm hoping that this is just a little bit broader, might bring in some
Yeah.
new interest.
And will this go,
Maybe not, who knows?
will it go out on the Vermont Developers Association listserv, or where are you thinking about posting, or how are you thinking about advertising this?
That's my question.
Yeah, we're open to suggestions. I mean, we're gonna post it on, we're gonna post it obviously on website, social media. We're gonna just have, if there's specific suggestions you have for distributing it, we'd be open to that. Yeah, so.
I don't think you'll have difficulty generating excitement, for it. I think obviously the media is going to pick up on this. It is a unique opportunity. So I don't think you're going to have trouble generating excitement and, getting the word out. I would suggest that we do have just some sort of process so that people can know, well, all right, once I send a letter of interest, what does that mean? And even how do we, the letter of interest is really, I view it more as a satisfaction of the council's curiosity as opposed to any sort of binding instrument, because if someone sends a letter of interest, I would imagine whoever sends it, even if it's a small developer, and we're not sure about their ability to successfully implement or finance the project, well, we're still going to invite them to apply. They still have the same right to apply. So again, I look at the letter of interest more as a satisfaction of council's curiosity and a gauge of interest, as opposed to any sort of, we're not going to have a process where we say, for example, a small developer sends a letter of interest. We wouldn't say to that small developer, well, gee, we think you're small, so we're not going to invite you to submit a full packet. We'd still allow anyone who wanted to submit a full packet, which obviously, when we get down to the final decision, has to include the tough things like demonstrate that you have the ability to finance this project, that you have the experience to actually build this project. Does that sound right to everyone?
What level of confidentiality can respondents expect at this phase in the
Absolute.
process?
Yeah, total.
Yeah, not like the Wheelock House.
All right,
Perfect.
So we'll make those edits and we'll get this posted.
sounds good. All right. But that takes us to upcoming business. So we have the pending zoning issue on Orchard Street, where there's the petition of about 20 neighborhood residents that are looking for some level of closure on what the zoning status of that property is. So that's coming up on the 18th, right? Are there other things?
The partners are going to present their budgets on the 19th. The warning for the charter changes is on the 19th. And I believe that is all I have at the moment. That's subject to grow.
All right, and council, are you still comfortable with the 6 o'clock start or 7 o'clock? It seems like we started to do 6 o'clock, but then we just filled it up with many more agenda items. And maybe I'm fine going back to 7 if, I don't know how the body's feeling, so.
Either's fine.
I prefer 7 o'clock and weekly.
I was getting used to the 6 o'clock. I can go with the 7. I'm very flexible. But what's hard is going till 10,
Yeah,
either way you look at it.
yeah, I think one request I'd have is not to have multiple like ceremonial things in the same night, like a dog presentation with the police dog presentation with the football thing, so that we can get through some more business and not be here all night, and just to try to keep it more tight and manageable. So I don't know. I'm hearing mixed reviews on 6 or 7.
I prefer the 6, only because for those who want to run home and grab a snack, great. I mean, I tend to just stay at the office until, if the meeting starts at 7, I stay at the office until 7. If the meeting starts at 6, I get here at 6. My thought on the 1 hour earlier start date, Counselor said it does avoid that. You know, like tonight, we're wrapping up. We started at 7, we had a short meeting. But if this was a 4-hour meeting, we'd be here until 11 o'clock at night. And it's, from experience, I don't see a lot of really good decisions get made at 11 o'clock at night.
Well, I think we're pushing our luck too much after 9, in fact.
I agree. So my thought was, when I originally suggested 6, was, well, if we start earlier, we end earlier.
Although that's not proven so.
That's not proven.
Well,
Yeah.
every other week has kind of made it tough, you know, and tonight we had a limited agenda, but we got some important discussions out of the way. And this was 2 hours that, maybe not 2 hours, but probably if we met every other week, an hour and a half or so, that would have been tacked on to next week's meeting.
Yeah, well, we've always had many standalone budget meetings, so this year's a little, and a Saturday work session to get through stuff, so this is a little bit different the past 2 years, so.
I think it's important that we're meeting weekly. We have a lot of stuff on our agenda, and when we don't meet weekly, we have to butt it up against many obstacles. And then when we get into that 9, 10, 11 o'clock hour, we're just so brain fried that none of us really want to be here anymore. No real concrete solutions are being accomplished. I think, personally, I like the 6 o'clock. I think consistency is important for me. I got 4 kids at home. I know that I'm a civil servant and I will be here whenever we need to be here. Personally, I like the 6 o'clock time better. It's winter in Vermont.
All right, 6 o'clock then. Councilor Boone?
Gotta modify the ordinance.
Yeah, we do need to modify that. That really should be followed, so. But maybe after we get through town meeting stuff, so.
And just playing devil's advocate, one of the reasons why the every other week is helpful for staff is, you know, we have a meeting on Tuesday, so we get back into our offices on Wednesday, the packets go out on Friday. And to have what is essentially 48 hours to research questions and gather information that counselors have asked for at a Tuesday night meeting and have it available in that shorter period of time can be challenging to be able to provide thoughtful, well-researched information in, you know, just over 48 hours, so.
So one thing I think, if we don't have every weekly meetings in January, then I would propose that we have a Saturday work session and have a big bulky review of the budget like we have done in past years, so.
So we plan to do that at Alumni Hall on the 9th. I mean, I think we, last year we did it that way. When it was a Tuesday meeting, we started earlier last year, which was 6 o'clock. And we had all the department heads there, and we're able to go line by line. So we certainly can. I think, you know, The staff's been run ragged. One of my things has been to be really respectful of who's here at the meeting. Tonight it's Dawn and Tess because they have agenda items. I do try to be very respectful of the staff's, time away from work. Not to say we can't do a Saturday session, but it is, it's a burden on people that work really hard. And I will echo Carol's comment about the every other week. I think I've said it to anyone who's asked me, but I think I've noticed we've become way more productive at the staff level going to every other week because of Carol mentioned the schedule that we keep. I turn into a pumpkin from Wednesday until Friday at noon, every council meeting week. So that's researching, preparing, calling, writing memos. We'll have every meeting you want to have. I just want to say that I just be very clear that the volume of work will slow down. So I just want to be very transparent about those expectations because it is very real that from Wednesday to Friday, people cannot really reach me on council meetings.
Just to interject, I think having had the every other week, in many ways, we've been more efficient because we haven't, I think sometimes when you have too many meetings, you fill the time not necessarily using it as productively as you might otherwise. And I think the every other week, except during times like this, when you've got a big budget you got to be looking at, or a crisis like all this last summer. But yeah, so I'm good with every other week, unless we're hitting the wall with other stuff.
Councilor Stockwell.
I also agree, every other week is much better. It gives me time to think about issues in depth. It gives the staff a breather. I think it's a better schedule.
Yeah, and I'm also on the every other week camp, except for, budget season. That's the only reason why I think like we need to make sure that there's a ballot item with the council's support behind it. And that's really standard practice throughout the state. I do wish, thinking about all the stuff on the planning commission's table, that they were meeting bi-weekly instead of monthly. That's a discussion for another time. So, yeah. All right. So roundtable. Who wants to go first? Councilor Booten.
Yeah, I do want to have an executive session just to let folks in
About what?
advance. Contracts and personnel. And you're unprepared for this. So just for the record. With that, I I fell into the rabbit hole of newspapers from the old days. And somebody had asked for some information on the Barre Auditorium. And I was like, I got a few books. And I went through and there was like maybe a couple paragraphs per book and all said the same thing. So I went through the old newspapers, Barre Times, and I forwarded them off to poor Carol, Nicholas, and Jeff. I'll say the creation of the Barre Auditorium, the story and how it went down was quite interesting. Highly recommend that folks go online. You can go to the National Archives and look up old papers from the Barre Times. And I just envision John Gordon sitting in front of, he was a former mayor, standing in front of those people at that time, pitching his idea for this crazy idea of tearing down Goddard Seminary, which one could argue that was devastating. But for this building, and we use it for our voting, and we use it for events, and that vision that he had, he brought it to fruition. One night on September 29th, he pitched it. It was voted on September 30th of 1938, and it was like 441 to like 627. And it was just very interesting to watch it go through that. And I will say that one of the articles stated that the auditorium was built so that we could have a pool in the basement. So just saying. Yeah, just saying. With that, I will pass.
Anybody else want to do roundtable? Counselor Deering?
Boys and girls hockey for Spalding has started. I think, let's see. So officially tomorrow is the first day. Wednesdays and Saturdays, the boys and girls will be playing. They play double headers on Saturdays, and on Wednesdays, I think it's just one team plays at 5:15 on Wednesdays and 3:15 and 5:15 on Saturdays. So come out and check out the hockey teams. Last year, the girls hockey team, as we know, went undefeated and won the state title. Caught a little bit of the boys and the girls in the preseason stuff. But it should be a lot of fun. So come on out and support Spalding High School hockey.
Anybody else? Counselor Stockwell?
It's not really an agenda item, but I'm not sure it's really roundtable. So I'm on the selection committee for Barre Up for people applying for grants. And one of the things I get a lot of is people saying that their landlord is not responsive. And I don't know how much of a burden this would be, but I'd like it if we could go to some sort of monthly reports saying, here's what we're seeing for code violations, here's how many. It doesn't have to be anything confidential, but I just feel like I don't know what's happening. And it would be useful to have more information about what is happening from code enforcement.
I think we can do that off the mobile eyes. I'll talk to Captain Copping about that.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I pass.
Anybody else?
I'll pass.
We'll pass too. All right, so we have an executive session.
Motion for findings.
Second.
There's a motion for findings to enter executive session under the contracts and personnel provisions. Any discussion? Hearing seen none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. The motion to enter executive session?
Motion to enter executive session to discuss
Second.
contracts and personnel.
And a second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we need to figure this out.
No action, Dave.
We know how
Thank you.
to,
Have a good night.
Good night.
So someone has
So we'll
to
have to-
form a breakout room.
Yeah.
I do not know how to.
We have faith in you, Mr. Manager.
Let's see. Got room. Create.
Neon off.
See you later. Yeah.
I think we'll have a nice bunch of stuff.
Hi, Carol.
Toodles.
Bye, Carol.
Bye, Carol.
Hey, Carol.
Hi, Nate.
So we're not assigning anyone.
Locked me in.
We
Can you just shut the
This is
Zoom
it.
down instead?
Assign anybody to it.
So we do offer this as a convenience. I'd say we just shut off the Zoom meeting.
You can, yeah.
I don't know that we can do that. I think we kick everyone off, don't we? I think we're the host. So I think if you shut off the Zoom meeting, I think you kick everyone off the meeting.
So I can mute this.
of executive session and immediately adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.